Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone. We just wanted to note that it is 105 outside, at least.
Wow.
Here in Los Angeles. So if you're hearing a little air conditioning hum, we just had to turn it on.
Deal with it, people. It's hot. Well, Nan, we lost a titan. I mean, one of probably the greatest film actresses that this industry has ever known last month.
Yes.
And that was GENA ROWLANDS. And today we are going to do a special tribute to Ms. Rowlands and her illustrious career and her extraordinary life. And I'm really excited about it.
Me too.
When she did pass away last month at the age of 94, she really left behind this film and TV legacy that will undoubtedly influence artists for decades to come. I think that's unquestionably true.
Absolutely.
As I was doing research for this, I saw a great quote from the great director Martin Scorsese, and he said at the time of her death, up there on screen, there was no one else quite like her. She had an extremely unusual combination of qualities. Her talent, which was extraordinary, her bravery and commitment to her art form, equally extraordinary, her presence. This was someone who could hold a room by just walking in and standing there. Her kindness and humanity, which I experienced firsthand, her beauty, earthy and ethereal, at the same time.
Wow.
I think that sums her up so beautifully. And, he went on to say that he likely would have left the film industry completely had it not been for the encouragement and the help that Rowlands and her writer-director husband, John Cassavetes, showed him when he was just starting out, which I think shows you the type of people they were and how they really embraced fellow filmmakers.
Yes.
He also added that if Jenna had been born a little earlier, she might have been a different kind of star, more like Mary Astor or Bette Davis, whose work she loved, but she married John Cassavetes. She did remarkable work with many directors, including Woody Allen, Paul Schrader, Jim Jarmusch, and her son, Nick Cassavetes. But the pictures Jenna and John made together, most of them shot in their own home at their own dime, were really family affairs made with complete independence.
Yes. In thinking about her career, so many people speak about the great actors of a generation who influenced this shift in acting from a kind of a heightened style to a more realistic, dangerous, if you will, style of acting.
Yes.
And they always talk about men.
Yes, they do.
And it just kills me. Nothing against James Dean or Marlon Brando or Montgomery Clift. They're fantastic actors, and they did shift how we think of acting today. But GENA ROWLANDS, as an actress, she needs to be at the very top of that list. She influenced a generation of actresses and actors, and her work in film and television is going to live on at a level that we all continue to talk about. When you see her being honored and feted at the Governor's Awards, every top actress in the community was at that, singing her praises.
Oh,
so,
my gosh.
as the Hollywood Reporter wrote on her passing, she is in the pantheon of acting legends. So
absolutely.
It's pretty thrilling to get to pay tribute to her.
Yes. She started out life, she was of pure Welsh descent. She was born Virginia Catherine Rowlands in Cambria, Wisconsin. Some people say it was Madison, Wisconsin, but I think Cambria is a suburb. She was born June 19th, 1930. Her father, Edwin Merwin Rowlands, was a banker who went on to serve in the Wisconsin State Assembly and was a Wisconsin State Senator. Her mother, Mary Allen Rowlands, was an artist who later acted under the stage name of Lady Rowlands, which she'll show up in several of Jenna's movies later. She also had an older brother, David.
And her mother, I loved this, taught Jenna to read quite early. And Jenna is quoted as saying, "I always wanted to be an actress. It came from reading so much. Acting itself is much like reading a book. As I read, I began to realize that you didn't have to live just one life. You could be a lot of people and do a lot of things."
In 1939, the family moved from Wisconsin to a suburb of Washington, D.C., where Mr. Rowlands worked in the agricultural department during the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration. After her father retired, the family moved to Arlington, Virginia, where Rowlands attended Washington Lee High School.
After high school, she received a scholarship to the Jarvis Repertoire Theater. She studied English literature at the University of Wisconsin. Member of Kappa Kappa Gamma.
My goddaughter Stella is a Kappa, so go Kappas.
Oh, yeah, go Kappas. Then she left school before graduating for New York City, and she enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. If you're not familiar with that school, it's an extremely prestigious acting school. It's been in operation for over 100 years. So many famous alumni, including Spencer Tracy, Lauren Bacall, Grace Kelly, you can't even list them all.
Yes.
And as she was enrolling, another up-and-coming performer was graduating by the name of John Cassavetes.
Ooh, now it gets good. Well, after a semester at the Academy, Rowlands performed in summer stock in Provincetown, Massachusetts. She then went back to the Academy. She had to perform in a final play.
Right.
And this play was called Dangerous Corners, which was by J.B. Priestley. And it was backstage after she'd performed that she met for the first time John Cassavetes, who came backstage to tell her that she was the world's greatest actress.
I just love
What
that.
a line.
Yes.
What a pickup line.
Yeah, it really is.
It worked.
Yeah, it worked. She was quoted as saying, in those days, if you got married, you had children and quit what you were doing. I wanted to be an actress bad enough that I would forgo the comfort of love. I was going to be very careful. So I went into lunch and put my books in my locker, and I saw John Cassavetes, and I thought, oh, damn, not this. This is just exactly what I don't want.
Well, of course, they were married 4 months later, right. March 19th, 1954.
But it didn't stop her because her first Broadway play is that same year.
Yeah.
She's in The 7-Year Itch with Tom Ewell playing one of the Dream Girls.
So maybe she could have it all.
Yeah.
She made her television debut about this time. It was the same year in a program called Top Secret, which consisted of 15-minute stories about undercover agents. And in 1955, she made guest appearances on 8 television productions,
wow,
including Robert Montgomery Presents' version of The Great Gatsby, in which she played Myrtle Wilson, Tom Buchanan's trashy mistress. Great part, too, for her.
Yes. Josh Logan, the famous director, saw GENA ROWLANDS in a Philco Playhouse segment on television, and he signed her to appear on what was kind of her big break on Broadway in Paddy Chayefsky's Middle of the Night, 1956, with Edward G. Robinson.
The man. I love him.
Yeah, it ran for 477 performances, and it really kicked her career into gear.
Oh, absolutely. She continued to do television about that time, Studio One, Armstrong Theater, Goodyear Playhouse. But then Hollywood came knocking.
Right.
And she was called in by MGM, and they signed her to a contract. She made her feature film debut as Jose Ferrer's wife in The High Cost of Living, a 1958 comedy that he also directed. Around this time in 1959, she gave birth to her first son, Nick Cassavetes, who we all know went on to have a nice career himself.
Yes.
And she quit acting for a couple of years so she could be a devoted mom and take care of baby Nick. But of course, that didn't last long. It was too much in her genes. She had to get back on stage.
Yes. In the early 60s, she appears in TV on such shows as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Tab Hunter Show. Mainly, she was taking these roles, though, to help fund John Cassavetes' films.
Yes. Other movies early on were Lonely Are the Brave, which was a contemporary Western with Kirk Douglas, and The Spiral Road from 1962, which was directed by Robert Mulligan, in which she played this God-fearing fiancé of a young doctor played by Rock Hudson.
And in Cassavetes' third film, A Child is Waiting, starring Judy Garland and Burt Lancaster, GENA ROWLANDS stars as the mother of an autistic boy. So this was the first film where she was actually directed by John.
Yeah, and boy, what a powerful performance, and this movie is fantastic.
And she continues to work in television, appearing in Bonanza, 77 Sunset Strip, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., lots of other ones. Her daughter, Alexandra Zan Cassavetes, is born September 21st, 1965.
And so in 1967, she appears in several dozen episodes of the nighttime soap Peyton Place. She plays this seductive socialite who ends up falling down some stairs and dying. It was a gig for her to stay home so she could take care of her daughter.
Right. And it sounds like, although this next one would have been fun, Tony Rome in 1967, which we talked about in our Richard Conte episode. She has a meaty role as the deceived stepmother of Sue Lyons in the detective mystery.
Yeah, and the next came such an important film, not only for Rowlands and John Cassavetes, but for American movies in general. It was Faces, 19 1968. This was a movie, it was shot cinema verite style in a startling and raw look at the disintegration of a marriage. Rowlands plays Jeannie, the younger other woman in this scenario of a collapsing marriage. And through her portrayal, we see this vulnerable, raw, complicated woman who just longs to be loved. It's a stunning performance, and it was also nominated for 3 Oscars, including Best Writing for John Cassavetes.
Moving into the 70s, her daughter Zoe is born on June 29th, 1970.
And then we get into 1971, another colossal film for John Cassavetes and GENA Rowlands, and this was Minnie and Moskowitz. It's kind of like a rom-com Cassavetes style, which means it's chocked full of loneliness and chaos and emotional rawness.
A dark rom-com.
A very dark rom-com. The film pairs GENA Rowlands with Cassavetes' regular Seymour Cassell as the title characters. It's this unlikely and complicated relationship between Cassell's Moskowitz, a loud, boisterous parking lot attendant, and Rowlands' Minnie, a museum curator who just sucks at love. And, seeing the mastery of the two of them together is something to behold. And the movie ended up being a total family affair. John Cassavetes put his mother, Catherine Cassavetes, in it, and also GENA Rowlands' mother, Lady Rowlands, plays Minnie's mother.
Wow.
Lady Rowlands would go on to appear also in A Woman Under the Influence as Jenna's character's mother, and also Opening Night.
In the early 70s, there's more TV work, but what really is important about the 70s is 1974, A Woman Under the Influence.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness. She plays Mabel Longhetti, a role that she will forever be known for. Her performance, it's indelible. I just rewatched it after she passed.
Yes,
and
me too.
You cannot take your eyes off of her.
It's breathtaking.
Yeah, and she does you just have to watch the film. She just does some of the most interesting original work. It revolves around the marriage of Mabel and her blue-collar construction worker husband, who's played to perfection by Mr. Peter Falk, who, by the way, at the same time is doing my favorite show right now, Columbo.
Yep.
He is so fantastic in this role. He's so
good.
Underrated as an
everyone
actor.
talks about her, but I don't think anyone really gives him his props for this movie.
I agree. She plays Mabel, who's this lonely and desperate woman trying to be understood. She's increasingly unstable. She's not only taking care of 3 kids, but Peter Falk's character keeps bringing home all these guys from work. I mean, it's just this crazy atmosphere. And Nick, Peter Falk's character, becomes worried that she might be having a mental breakdown. And he has her committed to an institution for 6 months. And when she returns, oh boy, it's a whole...
It is a new family dynamic, for sure.
It is, yeah, definitely.
A little side note here, and I think it's interesting, is I don't know if people have seen Jamie Lee Curtis in season 2 of The Bear, where she plays their mother.
Okay.
It is a raw, complicated, it's a performance that makes you uncomfortable.
Yes.
It is so raw. She said that her inspiration for that character was watching GENA Rowlands in A Woman Under the Influence, which I thought that was interesting.
It is so uncomfortable to watch, and it stays with you.
Yeah.
There's a very quick story I want to tell. She's been interviewed multiple times about this. The first day she's on set for filming A Woman Under the Influence, she is talking with John, her husband, and she says, John, I don't quite understand this first scene that I do. Can you help me here? And John stops and says, Jenna, I wrote this script with you in mind. And she says, yeah. And I asked you to read it, and you said you liked it. She says, yeah, I said I loved it. He says, you said you wanted to do it. And Rowland says, yes. And Cassavetes replies, then do it. And I sort of went, when I heard that, I went, oh boy. But what she said that did for her is that it gave her the most wonderful feeling of freedom. And she's quoted as saying, it made me think, quote, the part belongs to you. It's freed me up in so many things since.
Oh, wow. What a wonderful lesson to learn. And she also said about making A Woman Under the Influence, and this is a quote, you change your energy and allow another person to haunt your house, so to speak. I love that quote.
I do too.
It's like being a medium. It left me exhausted and depressed. Some of the time when you're walking out there where the air is thin, you just hope you can walk back again.
Oof.
Yeah.
I can understand how that role in particular would have gotten under her skin.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So making the film depleted Cassavetes' resources, and they had a hard time finding distribution. They finally distributed it themselves, and even without a studio backing them. And I think about this back then, how much harder it would have been than even now. I know it's hard now, but Rowlands was still nominated for an Oscar and won a Golden Globe, and the film created a sensation at the New York Film Festival. She should have won.
Oh, absolutely.
that year, but
Oh, it was a tough year though.
it was a tough
really
year.
Tough
there
year.
were a lot of good people up that year.
Exactly. And I think this is a pivotal moment in film history. I think it's the beginning of the rise of the independent movement of film. And I think they're hugely responsible for that.
Yeah. Well, they follow that, at least together, in 1977 with Opening Night,
Yes.
which is a tortured love letter to actors and the theater. Rowlands plays Myrtle, a famous alcoholic actress, swamped by fans at the stage door. She's kind of a diva during rehearsals, and she struggles to accept the aging that is happening to her in such a youth and beauty-oriented business. And then a fan is killed
Yes.
while chasing after her in a limousine.
And that's when the fun starts.
Yeah, that's when the fun
so
starts.
to speak.
So in one scene in particular, she's beating herself up using a door frame, knocking her head against the wood until her glasses break. I mean, it's just like...
That scene alone is, any actor needs to just study that as just
Yes.
the epitome of fine acting.
Yes. Well, and all of these films that they're making together, that John and Jenna are making together, they really are a family affair, as you mentioned earlier. And she's quoted as talking about, it was all a big stew. We made our movies in our houses. We had our kids there. I didn't want to go away and make movies. I had the greatest writer-director at home and had him chained up so no one else could get to him, which is so great. And then she goes on to say, he kept writing all these marvelous parts for me. It was a wonderful way of life.
To add on to that, when she ended up receiving her honorary Oscar, Nick Cassavetes spoke.
Yes.
And he spoke about the environment of growing up in that household. And one of the things he said, and I love this, he said, my parents made movies out of the house. They were a team. Strange crew members dominated the house. My bedroom was the editing room. Made for an interesting childhood. It was a great time, an exciting time.
Yes, yes. So she moves into some groundbreaking television movies. But before we get into that and the rest of her career, I think we should give this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Yes, absolutely. And keeping with the Gena Rowlands theme today, the question is, I think a lot of people know who've studied Gena Rowlands, her acting idol was Betty Davis.
Yes.
The question is, what is the movie that she finally got to perform with her idol, Betty Davis?
Oh, that's a great
That
question.
is the question.
We'll be right back with more about the incomparable Gena Rowlands.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Here in Hollywood, Fountain Avenue is a local favorite for many people who use it to cut across town quickly. It runs parallel between Sunset Boulevard to the north, Santa Monica Boulevard to the south. It's only 6 miles long, but it can save a lot of time. So that's why this joke is so good. Legend is that when Johnny Carson asked Betty Davis for advice on the best way an aspiring starlet could get into Hollywood, Miss Davis replied without hesitation, take Fountain. And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. But before we get further into the great career of Gena Rowlands, I wanted to give a shout out to our listener of the week, and that person is Carlos Saldano. Carlos has been great. He's been writing us. He would love to see us do an episode about science fiction stars. Ooh. And also, he wanted to see an episode about the very underrated Don Taylor, who you may know, he played the groom in Father of the Bride with Elizabeth Taylor.
Nice. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you,
for
Carlos.
listening.
Carlos.
Well, we left off in the 70s, and Rowlands is appearing in quite a few groundbreaking television movies that tackle some controversial subjects for the time. First, in 1978, A Question of Love, story of a lesbian couple, Rowlands and Jane Alexander raising 3 children from their former marriages. That one also starred Ned Beatty and Bonnie Bedelia. 78, The Brinks Job reunites her with Peter Falk as his wife in this comical fictional retelling of the infamous Boston Brinks Company robbery in the 50s. It had a great cast, including Peter Boyle, Paul Sorvino, Alan Garfield, and Warren Oates.
What a cast. But the 80s rolled around and it kicked off with a bang. And this is when Cassavetes and Gena Rowlands did Gloria. 1980, of course, it was written and directed by Cassavetes. It's this iconic neo-noir crime thriller, which really showed what a badass Gena Rowlands was. Yes. She plays the title character. She's his former mobster's girlfriend, and she's forced to protect this neighbor's child child because his parents were killed, and he has this ledger of information that could bring down the mob. And so it is a thrilling crime adventure where she has to keep this kid alive. And she just plays this world-weary, jaded mobster's ex-girlfriend to perfection.
Yeah.
It's just a riveting performance, which really shows that she's almost an action star in this one.
She really is an action star, and you're right. You're on the edge of your seat because you
Yes.
just think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next?
Totally.
Yeah, it's beautifully done.
She was once again nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. The film had its world premiere in the 37th Venice International Film Festival, and it won the Golden Lion,
Wow.
which was the festival's top prize, and although it tied with Atlantic City.
In 1982, she does Tempest, directed by Paul Mazursky. It's a loose modern-day adaptation of Shakespeare's The Tempest, starring her husband, John Cassavetes, Roland, Susan Sarandon, and a teenage Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on The Tempest. Anybody who hasn't seen that one, it's really worth checking out.
Yeah.
And then came in 1984, John Cassavetes' final film, Love Streams. It's this strange, kind of melancholy movie where Gena Rowlands and John Cassavetes play siblings, something new for them.
Yes.
It's about a complicated sibling relationship. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. You really should see this one. But it has the Cassavetes traditional, raw, emotional acting that's just riveting.
Right. Then there's a handful of television movies that she does. 1984, Thursday's Child, where Rowlands and Don Murray are parents advocating for their son's health. Happens to be Rob Lowe playing the son with a rare heart disease.
Disease of the week.
Yep.
Those
and
movies.
She won a Golden Globe for that. In 1985, she appears in a very important film for the time and continues to this day to be an important television movie, An Early Frost, one of the first to deal with the AIDS crisis at a time of misinformation and fear and a lot of hatred. Now, this one had the stellar cast of Ben Gazzara, Sylvia Sidney, John Glover, and kind of a star-making performance for Aidan Quinn.
Performance for Aidan Quinn.
Gosh, he's so good in it.
God, he's good.
Yeah. And then after that, in 1987, The Betty Ford Story, another cutting-edge film for that time about alcohol addiction, the struggles that First Lady Betty Ford had.
Which for that one, she won an Emmy and a Golden Globe.
Right.
She also gave another major performance in Woody Allen's film, Another Woman. And this is one of my favorite Gena Rowlands performances. 1988. It features this killer cast of Ian Holmes and Mia Farrow, Gene Hackman, Sandy Dennis, Betty Buckley, and Martha Plimpton. But this is Rowland's movie, make no bones about it.
Yes.
She plays a philosophy professor named Marion Post who's taken a leave of absence so she can write a novel. She leases this furnished apartment downtown to write, but she soon starts hearing voices through the apartment next door through the vents of the air conditioning unit or something. She realizes that she's now privy to this woman's therapy session. And this woman is named Hope, played by Mia Farrow, and she kind of becomes obsessed with Hope because I think what this woman Hope is going through really hits a chord with her.
Yeah.
And she almost becomes, she has to figure out Hope, and she starts to follow Hope. And it's just such a wonderful, psychological, interesting movie.
Yes.
Really stunning performance.
Yeah. Now, the following year, 1989, John Cassavetes dies at just 59 years old from cirrhosis of the liver caused by many years of heavy drinking. They had been married, Gena and John, for almost 35 years.
Imagine.
Yeah. So moving into the 90s, again, lots of interesting things. Once Around in 1991 with Richard Dreyfuss and Holly Hunter. Night on Earth, Jim Jarmusch.
Love that one.
Yep. 1992, Faces of a Stranger.
Can I tell you a little story? One thing about Night on Earth, she appears in a section called Los Angeles, and she's in a cab, and the cab driver is Winona Ryder. Winona Ryder was obsessed with Gena Rowlands before she ever got to star with her.
Yes.
So much so that as a young, undiscovered actress, she found out where Gena Rowlands lived, and she used to go and park her car outside of her house so that she could hopefully just get a glimpse of her. That's all she wanted. And then years later, she got to do this film with her, and I think they became pretty tight. But I love that story that she was such an inspiration to Winona Ryder.
That's so great. That's so great. In 1992, a performance that she won an Emmy for, Face of a Stranger. She plays a widow left destitute when her husband dies, and she befriends a homeless woman played by Tyne Daly, much to the chagrin of her judgy daughter, Cynthia Nixon.
Oh, Miranda. Don't be so judgy.
Right. 1992, she works with Martha Coolidge, Crazy in Love. Another great cast with Holly Hunter and Bill Pullman and Frances McDormand. And some other ones, particularly one directed by her son, The Neon Bible.
Yeah, absolutely.
1995.
In 96, she did a really fun movie also for Nick Cassavetes, and I really like this movie called Unhook the Stars, if you haven't seen it. It's about this really unlikely friendship of a lonely widow, of course played by Gena Rowlands,
right,
and this kind of brash, chaotic single mother who lives next door, played by Marissa Tomei. Great movie. Really, really wonderful character study of these two women.
Another film directed by Nick, 1997's She's So Lovely, that has Sean Penn and Robin Wright and James Gandolfini and John Travolta.
The cool thing to me about She's So Lovely, this was John Cassavetes' final screenplay. And he tried to make it, obviously, when he was still alive.
Right.
Good time to try to make it.
Right.
But it just sat on the shelf forever, and Nick Cassavetes found it and wanted to make it. I love that he sort of honors his father in this way.
Yes, that's wonderful.
And it's also, watching it, it reminds me of what it would have been had he made it in the 60s. It would have been Cassavetes and Rowlands and Peter Falk playing these three leads, and it would have been spectacular.
Yeah. Well, Gena Rowlands rounds out the 1990s with Hope Floats, directed by Forrest Whitaker. Written by
my pal, Stephen Rogers.
Yes.
A shout out to Stephen, who I know listens to our podcast. Thank you, Stephen.
Which is wonderful. And this is one of my favorite things. In 1999, Rowlands is named one of People magazine's most beautiful people in the world.
What took him so long?
I know, at the age of 69. And when asked for her beauty tips, she replied, "Sunglasses are the secret. Sunglasses and a little lipstick will take you to the market."
What a great quote.
I love it.
I think that just shows you her verve.
Yes, it does. It
does. The 2000s rolled around, and, she's still going strong. She does this wonderful television movie called Hysterical Blindness, which was directed by Mira Nair with Uma Thurman, Juliette Lewis, and her old pal, Ben Gazzara. It's about this complicated mother-daughter relationship. And for this one, she also won another Emmy.
She wins another Emmy in 2004 for The Incredible Mrs. Ritchie.
A daytime Emmy.
A daytime Emmy. She plays...
Not that we're Emmy snobs.
No.
We love the daytime Emmys.
Right. Hey, I'll take an Emmy in any form. Daytime, nighttime, afternoon. She plays an eccentric widow who agrees to let a juvenile delinquent work in her garden after he snatches her purse and is caught. That sounds delightful. I have not seen it.
That sounds so pleasant. I've never seen that one either.
Yeah. Now, this is the biggie that when Gena Rowlands died last month, this is what killed me.
Oh, it killed me too. I know what you're going to say.
Everybody said, Gena Rowlands, star of The Notebook, dies. And I just thought, that's how you're going to headline her death?
Did you forget about the first 4 decades of her career?
Not taking anything away from her fabulously talented son and how much I cried at The Notebook, of course. But come on.
Yeah, that's not how I would lead Gena Rowlands' obituary.
Yes. But anyway, she plays the present-day version of Allie, who was played in flashbacks by the wonderful Rachel McAdams throughout the film. And it was a family collaboration again.
Yeah,
yep.
Nick directed. Now we have another family connection. In 2007, Gena Rowlands agrees to star in Broken English, which was directed by another Cassavetes family member. This time it's Zoe's turn.
Yes.
And it's this love story about this lonely hotel worker played by Parker Posey who finds love with this unusual Frenchman. Rowlands plays Posey's domineering but well-meaning mother. So, she's going to do movies for Nick.
She needs to do movies for Zoe. Then, in 2009, she guest stars on Monk and is Emmy nominated. Can she do any performance and not get at least nominated or win? She's amazing.
No, exactly.
And her final screen appearances were in 6 Dance Lessons in 6 Weeks in 2014, based on the play by Richard Alfieri and directed by Arthur Allen Seidelman, which is a comic drama about a retiree and her handsome young dance instructor.
Sounds lovely.
And Unfortunate Circumstances in 2014, where she is in a comedy directed by Troy Price in which she plays a psychotherapist.
And of course, in 2015, she did get the Honorary Academy Award, which she thanked her husband for his contribution to her career. And in also the same year, she received the Los Angeles Film Critics Association Career Achievement Award.
Following Cassavetes' death in '89, just backing up a little bit, Rowlands did find love again with retired businessman Robert Forrest, who was a close friend. Both Cassavetes Cassavetes and Rowlands, according to the Wall Street Journal. The couple eventually got married in 2012.
In June 2024, as the Notebook celebrated its milestone 20th anniversary, her son revealed to the public that Rowlands had been living with Alzheimer's disease for the last 5 years. And as we all know, she passed away in her home in Palm Desert, California on August 14th, 2024. Can I just add a little personal thought here?
Yeah.
You know, I was fortunate enough to see GENA ROWLANDS on stage when she performed in A.R. Gurney's Love Letters at the Cannon Theater in Beverly Hills, and I think it was 1990. And to make it even more spectacular, she was starring opposite her longtime friend and collaborator, Ben Gazzara.
I was wondering if he was the one.
They were so spectacular. They created such intimacy. It was a connection that you knew they had to know each other and had to be friends and had to have some kind of spiritual connection. It was just wonderful. And then many, many years later, I saw her again. It was probably the mid-2010s, and she was walking through the lobby of the Cinerama Dome movie theater in Hollywood, and she absolutely was lit from within. And I can't describe it, but she had a glow about her. Every single eye in that building they were trying to be subtle, but every eye was on her. And she stopped traffic just by walking across a lobby casually.
Wow.
And I've never seen such magnetism or star power, in my life.
Yes.
It was something to see.
That's amazing. You didn't accost her?
I didn't. I wanted to, but I just didn't. I just let her walk by.
I know. Yeah. That's amazing.
Thought,
wow.
I'm in the presence of greatness here in this lobby of a theater.
Yes. Well, there's so much greatness in these films and television movies that she's made. It just means that we get to go back and revisit her work for the rest of time.
I know, what a legacy.
What a legacy. Let's give the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And of course, the question was, GENA ROWLANDS idolized Bette Davis, and she eventually got to work with her in a movie. What was the movie?
The movie was Strangers, the Story of a Mother and Daughter.
Yes. And of course, she played Bette Davis's daughter.
1979.
It's a real tearjerker about this woman who left home years ago under these acrimonious circumstances, and she finds out she's terminally ill, so she comes back home to make amends with her very bitter mother. Talk about two powerhouses on screen going at it.
Yes.
And there's a great story about when she first met Bette Davis, and I love this. When she was to show up for the very first table read, the first time she's ever going to meet her idol, Bette Davis, there's an accident on the freeway, and people in Los Angeles, you will so relate to this, she's 45 minutes late. Which, in Bette Davis's eyes, this was just unforgivable.
And unprofessional. And everything.
And so Bette Davis ignored her the entire day, wouldn't look at her, wouldn't speak to her.
Gosh.
She said that it was the frostiest chill she's ever felt from a woman, even though she tried to explain herself. And then she said to the director, she said, "Why did you cast that woman? She's way too tall to play my daughter." So, GENA felt terrible. But eventually, Bette Davis warmed up to her. I think she really appreciated her professionalism and her talent. And they became really good friends.
Can I add one other little Bette Davis story
that
she tells? And you can Google it if you Google Governor's Award and GENA ROWLANDS' speech when she accepts the Oscar. I'll make it very brief. She talks about, she goes to see the dailies, and she's sitting in the theater, and across the way, on the other side of the theater, is Bette Davis, who's sitting next to the cinematographer.
Smoking, probably.
Yeah, probably. She's sitting across the way with the cinematographer, and GENA can't hear what they're saying, but she can read body language. And this is a podcast, so I can't, show you what she was doing, but it was clearly that Bette Davis was telling him something very forcefully, very firmly. And GENA thinks, I'm just going to kind of slip out of here. And she starts to go up, and Bette Davis sees her leaving the theater and says, "GENA," to stop her. And she stops and she says, "Did you see that up there on the screen?" And she's, "What? Did you see my lips?" No, I wasn't paying attention. "You didn't see my lips? They were orange," or whatever the color was. I think she said orange. "No, I just didn't really notice." And Bette Davis's response is something like, "Well, you better notice. You're no spring chicken."
Oh, Betty.
But it was such a great self-deprecating story. She tells it way better than I did, so go look it up. Thank you, everyone, for listening and being with us today. We would so appreciate it if you would follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And we'd love love to hear from you. Please email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's View.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.